You are listening to Journeys on wolfspirit.tv and YouTube and wherever else. We haven't got any sites outlets yet. Anyway, this is Rebecca, Jernigan, and JP doing something new, something different. Welcome to Journeys. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody, to Journeys with... Hang on, I can stop this. That's right. There we go. Good afternoon. Welcome to Journeys. I am JP, and this is Rebecca. Good afternoon, Rebecca. How are you?
I'm lovely, dear. How are you?
I'm as lovely as you are.
Good,
well,
good.
No, 9/10 as lovely. I couldn't possibly be even... I couldn't out lovely you.
Aren't you sweet?
So today we're going to start on our discourse of the construct and what the Elohim have spoken to you about. So do you want to kind of introduce the whole concept yourself?
I will. I think that's important for us to have a basis in which, so when we continue these through the next few weeks, whoever knows how long, that you have that those that are listening and will be listening will have a better understanding of where this information come from. The phrase was coined in about 2008 or 2009. They coined it to me. Everyone was talking about the matrix, and my guy Elohim said, well, it's not really the matrix, it's actually a construct. It's the construct. And so that began kind of the question and answer. And I think what people need to understand is that the Elohim don't just sit down and just like dump information and tell me things. I have to ask the questions. I might get a spark or an opening from them, but it's up to me to continue that conversation in line of questioning. And if I don't ask a question in a manner in which they can actually reply to it, I get silence back. And that has come through the years of learning how that I need to communicate with them. And if I don't get a response back, then it means I need to ask the questions differently and put them into a different frame of being. And it has allowed me to grow as an individual exponentially. It really has, because I've had to get out of the a way to ask questions like I would ask normal questions, or I shouldn't say normal, because there really is no such thing as that. But I would have to ask questions based on a different perception, a deeper, more profound perception of what it was that I was really looking for as far as the answers were concerned. So began a ongoing dialogue with the construct. Now, because of that particular verbiage, it also opened up a whole myriad of different lucid dreams, of dream times, of information, of downloads, of running across other people's materials and little snippets here and there. It's been an ongoing process. So the construct that was born, because they don't really like the term matrix, they believe that the construct is because it was actually made, and that's what they told me. They said that it was made, that the construct was put here on this planet, so to speak, and there's further information than just that. So I'm going to leave that statement for a while until we get later on into conversation about that and expound on that particular thing. But for right now, we're going to keep it kind of linear as much as we can. Pardon me. So the construct was something that was put into place, and I'll call them the controllers. And there's more than one group, and there's more than one species. And they're not necessarily working together, but what they do is they and I've talked about this aspect before as well, is that there are natural energy flows on and off the planet, within the solar system, the galaxy, etc., and so forth. There's natural energy signatures. They resonate at different fields. There's different vibrations, and they're naturally occurring because it's the law of physics. It has to do with quantum physics, etc., and so forth. So these controllers are also able. They're also highly evolved technologically speaking. So they're able to tap into these natural energy sources, streams, if you want to call them that, and piggyback on them. And while they're piggybacking on them, they become more on the surface as opposed to deeper into the actual stream itself. So they're not really manipulating the actual stream of information or energy. What they're doing is they're riding on top of it, so that that's the first thing that you sense or feel or recognize, because you're not in a quantum mindset to look beyond what is in the topical layer of that, if I'm making any sense at all here.
So there's like an organic version and there's an overlay on top. Would you say that?
Yeah, that's what the construct is.
It's like taking an old wooden table and then putting a plastic film on top to make it look like old wood.
That's partially, yes. And also with that line there, it also it uses the energy of what's already existing with an addition of what I would call artificial energy that's put on the top of it. So it mimics energy. And if you're energy sensitive, like the Star Wars theme, there's a disturbance in the force. You can feel when something is not correct with the energy streams coming in. So what they've done is they've hijacked these energy streams, and they can manipulate it as much as they can change its course slightly. They can alter it. They can alter the thickness or the thinness of it, and that makes a difference because it changes the resonance field and the vibration of it. So if you got a real thin stream and you got a real thick stream, it'll feel different and it will react different. So this construct was built like a grid system almost. And they keep wanting me to say it's tubular. So there's these tubular things that are all around us, right? Matter of fact, what they did say to me too is that some of our scientific instrumentation is picking up on these energy signatures, but they're not getting deep enough into them to recognize that some of these are artificial signals. Okay, so they are detectable by our more modern standards. When this construct was originally created, built, if you will, the controllers absolutely knew that this construct wasn't going to last forever. It wasn't a infinite without any mortality, because it does have mortality. They just didn't know exactly how long it was going to last, and they knew that within the plan of this construct that they would have other things that they could accomplish, and that by the time that the construct itself started to become degraded, that their plans or their ideas or their whatever it is that they're doing with the construct, and we'll talk about that, would already be established. And it would be very, very difficult for people that were not energy sensitive or were not looking beyond surface things to understand that this has been something that was made and created and placed here to keep the humans in without knowing what really happened. Some people call this the amnesia state. I mean, when we come through and end up being within this construct, again, some people call it the matrix, we have no remembrance much of who we are. But in the last recent years, and you can say the last recent years has been probably the last few thousand years, the construct itself has become degraded. Its energy signatures are eroding. There's been some shifting and changing out in the cosmos, so to speak. The solar system continually moves, the galaxy continues to move, and when it does, it moves into different energy fields and different energy belts that are naturally occurring. So this changes the construct itself. Some of it actually overrides the construct in certain points. Some of it actually enhances the construct at certain points by these naturally occurring things. But the point behind it is that they couldn't plan for how their construct was going to react to the changes as the planet itself and the solar system itself moved through space. Does that make sense?
So they couldn't build it as robust as. So when they say it's built, it's not made of three-dimensional stuff. It's made of etheric stuff. Is that right?
It's a technology that we've yet to really understand completely, because it deals with energy itself, and some energies can be seen and others cannot, right? It's kind of like air movement. You don't see the air moving, but you can feel it moving. You know that it's there because you can feel it, right? So
You can feel the effects of it.
Yes, and that's what the construct is. It wasn't meant to be seen. It was meant to control. It was meant to subdue. It was meant to contain. So it was more like a containment field. And it also has many other purposes. Again, you got to remember there's not just one species or one race or one group that's responsible for this, because the original groups, there was more than one, that decided they were going to build this construct in order to keep the life forms on this planet and other planets in control and keeping them subdued. I lost my train of thought. I had 15 thoughts come in there all at the same time.
The reason that it was built to keep all what was because this is the the questions that I have immediately. The questions I have immediately are who built it and why.
Okay,
and
well, so
okay,
that's where I was
for?
going. Okay, well, I already said what it was for. It was for a containment field. It was also for sending signals, information in this construct that would end up becoming, for some people, truth, right? It's an illusion. And that's what the construct was for. It was to create an illusionary existence and worlds from a finer point, not like we're painting a landscape and you look out and you see sand and it's really all lush and green. It was to keep the evolution of the human under control, as well as other life forms, not just the humans, but other life forms as well. It was also used for some of the groups used it to contain those that were here prior to the building of the construct, so that they couldn't effectively send out for help or signal others to come forward, or whatever the case may be. There are numerous reasons why the construct was built. And at first it started out as kind of an altruistic thing, like we must keep them safe. Well, what happened is that there were others that didn't want to keep us safe. They wanted to keep us subdued, and they wanted to keep us in the dark, and they wanted to keep us without knowledge and without evolution. When people make the statement, this is a prison planet, they're not off base with that concept. The prison planet concept is really people not really understanding that it's the construct that's been put into place that chained some here and didn't allow others to leave from here. And as well as that, it also prevented us from knowing our true history, other than a few 100,000 years, maybe. But this planet and this solar system and this galaxy is way older than that, as we know. So there's all kinds of history, there's all kinds of information, there's all kinds of technology that has been subdued to the races that came afterwards, and they didn't want us to know where we came from and who we really are. There's not one single group that I can put my finger on and tell you this is the one that is responsible. Because once the idea was born, before it was even fully implemented, it was already being hijacked and it was already being used for nefarious reasons. And that technology is layer upon layer upon layer. We do not understand the technology, no matter how we would try. It was built by beings, many different species, groups, whatever you want to call them, that had technology well beyond what even some of the greater minds are even aware of at this point. I can't even intelligently tell you what it is conceptually that they show me, because I have no reference point at all to put onto it so that it can make any kind of logical or reasonable sense whatsoever.
So you got it's like a very, very long time ago, but the worst thing is that it hacks into our ability to remember things from long ago. Does it alter the Akashic records? How connected is it with the Akashic records?
Well, it's like anything else. It's going to any of your records that you would actually be able to go in and ascertain. You want to make sure that you have a clearing of the information so that you can actually see what the truth is. It cannot change the reality. Let me reframe that. It can't change the truth of somebody's records, but what it can do is skew your reality of what you're looking at. It doesn't have the ability to change the truth. What it has the ability to do is to give you an illusion of what the truth is.
So it will spin it, as we call it these days.
It puts a spin on the truth for sure. But that being said, you have to also understand that through the years, there's always been people that have been able to break through this construct. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the great spiritualists in times past. You wouldn't have the prophets from the time past. You wouldn't have people that are questioned the status quo. You would not have had scientists that brought forth evolutionary changes on this planet. All of those things would not have been possible had the construct been built, let's say, by just one group. See, when you've got a construct out there, when you've got a natural grid, and then you decide that you're going to build something over it or on top of it and skew it, right? Then you've got a whole big mess in there if you've got more than one. Because your idea of how to build a car and my idea how to build a car are going to be two different things. You're going to need something or want something different than I do. So if one group had been responsible for it, this wouldn't be such a cluster thing, right? It would be streamlined, it would be simplified, and this is what it does. But because there's so many hands involved in this, and other groups wanting to get involved with this whole thing about, playing around with this technology that they have available, not that it's a right thing to do, that it gets skewed. Everything gets skewed. So the purpose of it, the real purpose of it, was not a negative. It ended up being that way because of all the layers of technology and the people piggybacking off of other things and piggybacking and then changing signals, et cetera, and so forth. It became something other than what it was originally created for.
You know what this reminds me of is a few years ago, we heard that the NSA, in their great wisdom, ordered a whole bunch of Cisco routing devices, internet routing devices,
Right.
and they bought them from Cisco, which is an Israeli company, and they said, when you make these things, could you build us a back door so that we can spy? It was the telephone exchanges, the American telephone exchanges. They asked them to build a back door into the telephone exchanges so that the NSA could listen to American people in the public. But what obviously, like it's the Israelis built a back door into the NSA's back door. And that's how they got the telephone call from Princess Diana to her friend. That's how they did that, using that. So this
So the
sounds a bit like
hijackers hijacked the hijackers.
hijackers. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what
And it
this is
serves
they've
them right.
hijacked it. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So are we talking? There's a sort of fractal analogy here.
Yes, that's a decent analogy. It's a good comparison, comparatively so. When you're talking about technology that we don't even have names for yet, it works for me.
Okay. So fingers in pie. Who's got their finger in this particular pie?
Name some groups.
Okay. The Orion Consortium.
Yes.
The Archons.
Yes.
Yeah. The Mantoids.
Indirectly.
The Greys.
Yes. By order.
By order, because they're
By
controlled
order.
by the reptilians or the mantids.
Depends on which group you're talking about.
Yeah. See, the whole problem with
You
the whole
see
exopolitics.
you see how much
Oh,
can
yeah,
get
it's very
convoluted?
complex.
Yes.
Yeah. The whole exopolitics thing is that there seems to be an underlying AI nanobot kind of configuration, black goo thing that is controlling everybody. That there's a thing, that this thing is in everything, and they're manipulating everybody against each other, and that according to my guest last night, we are the last hope against this thing, because we are actually able to manifest. We're able to manifest nothing out of something out of nothing, which means that we can also demanifest anything out of anything. And it's only when we are able to not make their world, not recreate their world all the time, that we can move forward and evolve and create our world. But we have to stop them by demanifesting them.
All right, so let's go back to the statement you made from your guest last night, that everything is being controlled by this black goo, or whatever you want to call it, artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
If that was the case, and that's why I try to stay away from those "this is the way it is and it can be no other way" statements, right? Definitive statements such as that. If everything is being controlled by that, then we wouldn't have knowledge of the conversation we're having now. It wouldn't be out there.
Through, so it's not completely in control. It's not complete control.
That's what the construct was all about. The construct was, like I said, they knew that only some people may be able to get out, but as more and more people get awakened and people can see through the illusion, more and more people are breaking through the construct, more and more every day. So it no longer controls everything. It still controls the status quo, in as much as how we look at our society structures. If you look at all the wars and threats of wars going on, I mean, everything is escalating, everything. When you stop and look back through our quote unquote history, it's never been without war. Where did that come from? Do you think that humans in our divine engineering were meant to be at war with each other? Was that the purpose of building and creating a race so that it could kill each other off? Does that make any sense to anyone? Here, let's create these wonderful human beings, and then we're going to put something in them so they'll kill each other off. What purpose would that serve anybody? So you have to know that that information, that portion of acceptability that we have in our societies is something that has been injected. It's not part of our nature. You see the difference? And so our society structures, which includes your religious and non-religious structures as well, whether you're a kingship or you're a socialist or you're a democratic country, doesn't matter. There's still these standards that are set, that are environmental standards that come from the building of the outcropping, so to speak, of the energy of the construct. Does that make sense?
That's very interesting. Yes, yes. So, because that ties in with the things that my guides have been talking about, that they're talking about working on the current what was the word? Preoccupation. They call it the current preoccupation of humanity, which I said, what's that? I said, the war. I said, all right, you want me to start war, do you? All right, okay. Good luck with that. Well, but what they're talking about is what perpetuates it. And what perpetuates it is the freezing of the astral body, the freezing of the emotional body, that holds people into a single emotional beingness. It doesn't allow them to flow. Like emotions flow, they rise and they fall. They don't stay. But because it's been, because people have been traumatized, it freezes those emotions, and so they stay locked in an emotion. And you know, some people die with those emotions. That's what we call ghosts. They get caught in that preoccupation. So so what they're saying is that if we can reduce the solidity of that, allow things to flow, allow the emotions to start flowing again, then people will be less prone to being warlike.
Well, stop and think about when you're faced with and I don't care, any kind of a situation. It doesn't matter what the situation is. My gosh, I had like 40 of them that just popped in my mind that I could have used as comparisons. But let's say you had a situation that arose, and there's one thing to be detached from the outcome of it. It's quite another to not recognize how you feel about something. And I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was on Facebook, and there was a post on Facebook, and it was a post about, it was actually a little video of clips of all the wars and how people are waking up from them, and even some of the soldiers that have come back. We're talking about the United States here now, come back from Iraq and Afghanistan wars and Vietnam wars, et cetera, and so forth. So this whole video thing was about hoodwinking the soldiers into going to war to protect the country. And of course, they've exposed it as, you know, Iraq, we were not at war with Iraq. We didn't have to worry about Iraq invading the United States. Why were we really there? War after war after war after war, right? And then there was soldiers that they were showing in different, again, these were all clips just put together, you know, little pieces put together. And it showed 3 or 4 different clips of different times where soldiers would be behind a table with mics, and they were being interviewed or talked about or talked to or whatever. And they were saying how much they didn't appreciate being lied to, that this is not upholding the Constitution, that they swore to uphold the Constitution and not to fight a money war that somebody else wanted to start in their name, blah, blah, blah. So it just goes on and on and on, right? All these soldiers, and then these clips of all these wars and innocent people dying. And I just absolutely, it just like triggered me. And I just, you know, was bawling like a baby when I was watching it, because I was like, it just doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to be this way. We can choose to be a different way. the point is that there are still people out there, JP, that don't know that they can make the choice. They are so driven by the status quo. Remember, I talked about that in the beginning here, just a little bit ago, rather, about the environmental structures that have been put into place because of this construct that was artificially hijacked our natural energy grid system that went on, and it keeps getting injected with this crap. And it's like this, it's like somebody replaying something over and over and over and over and over and over again in your head. That's what society is. It just keeps repeating the same thing, just in a different day, just in a different uniform, just in a different country, but it's the same thing over and over again. We have to break that. And the construct is degraded. And it's going to continue to degrade as we move through the solar system, whatever you want to call it, or everything moves through space, rather. It's going to continue to get degraded. So what we have to teach people, and we have to understand for ourselves, is that we can make a different choice. Even if our society says, no, you have to go to war, we can say, no, we don't. I choose not to. That's how we break the bonds of this construct, of this artificially injected energy field that's been hijacked by so many numerous entities and beings. We can do it. We have to make the choice. And we have to educate other people that they have a choice.
I think the movement from being told what to do to choosing what we want and doing that's evolution. And that journey, this is the journey we talk about. Right. This is what your program's all about. It's the journey from one to the other in my parlance, it's the journey from the personality to the soul. Right. It's the same equivalent. And you have your own words, and everybody else listening has their own words of, where you're at and where you want to be, from the fallen humanity to the ascended humanity, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we turn into big, puffs of white smoke, or that we explode out of our boots into the sky. No, what it means is that we're not in the same doubt and subservient and servitude kind of position, and we're actually in the position of saying, okay, I want one of those over there now, and when you say that, that's what happens. And it either happens out of thin air, or loads of people come together and make that thing happen. Right. However manifestation may occur to you.
Right.
But that is where we're going. We're going from being told to doing the telling. And a lot of people don't like the sound of that, do they?
They don't. So let me just say, I want to get back to your guest from yesterday, because I've left you hanging with that in the audience too, because my job here isn't to find fault with other people's information. But if you look, or if you listen back to what he said, he's talking about a black goo that or whatever artificial intelligence that has overtaken us and is making all the choices and decisions for us, et cetera, and so forth. And I'm telling you that it's a construct, that it's a mechanical thing. And artificial intelligence is something that's built, right? It doesn't just randomly happen. Artificial intelligence is just that. The word artificial is in it for a reason, right? So if you want to call this AI, you can call it AI, because it's not naturally occurring. What they did was they hijacked the natural energies and used it to enhance their nefarious plans, right? So the black goo, the AI, whatever you wish to call it, it's the same lines of what I'm talking about. We just, again, have different verbiage for it.
Exactly. It's just different words.
Yep. So I want to get into, I was going to hold off and do this next week, but I think I'm going to go ahead because of the way this is kind of progressed here today. I want to get into, remember I told you, is back when they talked to me about the construct, that there was numerous other instances that happened after that fact that we're always directly or indirectly, a lot of it was indirectly and directly related to the construct information, right? And next week, I would actually like to get into really how much the more subtle things on our day-to-day life is how the construct has affected each and every one of us, and still does. I mean, even you and I sitting here today is part of that. And, you know, that's the other portion of this. But I want to get into my vision of the talking heads. And I meant to actually record this so that it would go on my website so people could hear this. I don't think I can get it recorded separately from this, but I would like to record it separately.
I can. Okay. I can clip that.
Okay. Okay. The talking heads. In this particular vision, night vision, my guides come to me. I always have the same one that kind of steps forward, and it's a male, and he shows me, takes me places, delivers me to places, drops me back. But he seems to be the one that is taken the lead as far as my companion in these learning lessons. So this guide was there, and all of a sudden we're standing outside I'm on planet Earth, and we're in modern time, whatever that means. And I'm looking out, and he's standing there, and of course I always say hello to him, and then he motions to me to look outwards, and so I turned to my left. I'm sorry, I turned to my right at that point. I turned to my right, and I looked out, and here is this field, and it's just miles and miles of these posts with heads on them sticking up from the ground, maybe 3 feet with the head included. Now, when I looked at these posts and these heads on it, I realized that some of those heads on there weren't active, but others were. And they were very gray in their look. Now, that does not have anything reference to do with the grays. It was simply, that's what they looked like, was gray matter, right? And they're a cross between a Toltec and some kind of a knight. They wore these kind of weird helmet-looking things on their head, which is, that's all there was just the head. But on top of it, that's what they were wearing.
Were they all unique? Did they all have unique hats?
No, yes. Their hats were similar, but I mean, you know, they weren't so far apart that it was like, oh my gosh, look at the difference. There were subtle differences from one to the other, which represented an individuality. Okay, even their faces were slightly altered from each other, right? So I look at these talking heads, and I turn around, and I'll tell you why I call them the talking heads here in just a few minutes. And I turned back to my guide, and I was like, and so what am I supposed to do with this? What's this about? So at that point, I was taken below the ground, as if the ground was cut out, and I could see underneath all of this, just like you could see above, like there wasn't any earth around them, right? But I could see these posts coming down, and from these posts, they were all connected. All these talking heads, they had these filaments, they had these tubes, they had these lights that all connected, and some of them connected were tethered, 3 or 4 of them together, some 5 or 6, some just 1 or 2, but they all went up and out, back up and out into, I will call, into vast space, right? So I'm looking at these, and I'm looking at this guide, and I was like, and so what's this? He's like, I need you to look at these very, very carefully. So as I paid more attention to these tubes, streams, I realized that they were all slightly different in color. And as I got closer and closer, I could see that there were actually pulses of light, that it wasn't just a constant light movement, but that's what my eyes perceived because the pulses were so fast. So at some point, I literally jumped into one of these tubes. I was watching this one particular one, and as I was watching it, I got the rhythm, because everything has a rhythm. Everything has a rhythm. And I jumped into the tube in between these light pulses, and I followed that tube up and out, and I traveled for a long ways. Where I came up was into a very large room, and I would call this, because I know no other term for it, a lab, a laboratory. And as I did, I was actually coming up through the floor, because that's where the tubes were coming from. And then all of these tubes went to these different machines, and it had all these different displays, and there was all these different weird beings there, and they were monitoring all of this information that was coming from these streams, these tubes that were coming from the planet Earth, right? So as I was poked my head up, I remember him saying to me, "You cannot let yourself be detected." So because I know how to play with energy, I literally sucked my energy in and became what you would call an observer. In other words, I was not deriving any, I wasn't making any kind of judgment or discernment. This is good, this is bad, this is evil, this is wonderful. What is he doing? There wasn't any of that. It was simply just being there. And I was watching all of these tubes and these streams, and I was watching them being manipulated, and then they would be sending stuff back down in it. It's like when you go to a bank, and you used to have the old banking systems, and you'd put your check or whatever it was in the tube, and it would suck it into the bank, and then it would suck it back down into you. It was kind of one of these things, like this vacuum thing. And all of these things were going on, and they were twisting dials and punching buttons and all of this. And I will tell you is that at some point somebody sensed me looking, and so I went back down into the stream, and I jumped back off. And then as I was coming down, I looked out, and I seen where all of these tubes were literally attached to every human being on this planet. Everything. All these billions of individual strands were attached to this stream. These streams, more than one, of information that came from the Earth, went up into this laboratory, and then back down, and it made the circle. And then from those streams from those individuals, every individual, as I went down and I looked at that, some were connected with each other, some were connected across the globe, some were, just 2 or 3, some had hundreds, some had thousands connected, in these big bundles, right? And they all led back into the field of the talking heads. So I said to my guide at that point, after and this takes way less time to tell than it did for me to experience it. So I arrived back where I was started from, but I'm still underground. I looked at my guide and I was like, okay, so this isn't good. What am I supposed to do? And he said, you have to help these people disconnect from the streams. You have to help them disconnect. Okay. Now, how do I do that? Well, you have to pull from these talking heads. And that's not what he called them. That's what I called them. And you have to be careful, because if you pull the wrong one, you're going to get detected, and then you're in trouble. I can't help you if you get detected. So I remember looking at all these strands, and I poked my head up at ground level, and I looked out, and I remember making a noise. And when I did, in the field of these heads, one of them opened their eyes, and when that one opened their eyes, there was 10 more that opened their eyes, and they were communicating with each other. there's a disturbance in the force message. That's why I call them the talking heads, because they're the lines of communication. So at that point, I went back underground and I just laid there for the longest time, if whatever. And then I began my journey backwards and tried to start disconnecting people. And then I thought, well, I have to be careful, because what if I'm disconnecting somebody I'm not supposed to disconnect? And so that process for me literally is still going on as to who to disconnect and who not, because I don't know anybody that I'm doing this with. And there has to be a check and balance. It's not like I have that information, right? Oh, let's see, I got a list here. This person wants to disconnect from, the construct, right? It's not up to me to make that call. That's not my job. My job is simply to assist those that want to be disconnected from the construct. Some people call it the matrix. So that's my story of the talking heads.
Okay, can I ask you? Can I drill down some things?
Oh, please do.
Okay, so all right, so we have the field of heads. Beneath them is a kind of almost like a switchboard box.
Yep.
A
wires everywhere. Yep.
Yeah. What do you call them? A telephone exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Or a data exchange. And then there are cords that lead up into labs. And the labs are somehow manipulating they're somehow manipulating the energy and then feeding it back down to people.
Yeah.
So the flow of data, flow of stuff goes from the talking heads into the lab and then down to the people. Is that right?
Yes. And then there are the real thin strands that are connected back up into the talking heads as well. They feed in from the bottom they feed in from the bottom. And they're so fine you can barely even discern them.
Okay, so what you saw as this threat. Now, I have seen, well, I started with myself. I started disconnecting these things because I asked, have I got any cords or attachments to me? I asked my dowsing, and I got yes. So yeah, and then I figured out that I could cut them. And when they talk about cords, people think of string. No, they're like umbilical cord. It's like a kind of almost like a vein with veins around it. It's really kind of quite gristly. Well,
right.
that was the sort of energy that I found. It was quite a gristly, organic tube kind of thing. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, when you're talking about that kind of a cord is a different kind of a cord. That attachment. This literally is a standalone. The construct is a standalone thing. It's a control mechanism. It's a manipulation of the earth herself, because it hijacks all the energy. It sits on top of it. When you look at the grid system, and those that are energy system sensitive can see this, you'll see where there's some spots in the energy grids that are not as brilliant, not as bright. Some of them are even bent, so to speak, because they've been hijacked or they've been manipulated or moved or whatever the case may be. So when you're talking about those cords of attachment, that's usually representative of a time or a place or a person. It has to do with your personal soul journey. But remember that the precedence here in the construct is that it's the illusion. So when you have these cords of attachment, you have to make sure you brush off the top of them real good so that you can make sure that whatever's below the surface level is really something that you need to deal with. Make sense?
Brushing the top off them.
Yeah, it's like
could you go a little
like,
bit more in detail?
yeah, you have a pencil, right? You can see that pencil. Then somebody comes along and it puts sand on it. Now, when you're looking at it, you can still tell that there's an outline and there's a pencil. So in your idea, there's a pencil. There's not sand. There's a pencil there. That's how you would perceive that. You wouldn't perceive it as there's a pencil with sand on top of it. But in order for you to see that pencil for what it really is, you have to remove the sand, so you brush it off.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about. That's in its simplistic form. When you're talking about energy streams, they will gather, if you will, debris along the way, especially if somebody is using that specifically to drop debris on it.
So a bit like cobwebs catch dust. They accrete.
A bit like that. So when you're looking at your own stuff, you want to make sure that you're brushing everything off, that you're getting to what's really there and not what you think you see. Most people will do one of two things, JP, when they're looking at themselves. They are going to find fault with themselves. I'm a terrible person. I did a terrible thing. You know, I'm, I could have, would have, should have. You know, I need to, make amends or atone for this. Or they will turn it around and they will be the victim. Everyone hated me. Everyone was mean to me. Everyone was this. So when you're looking at a cord of attachment as an example, usually you're going to come at it from one of those two places. So what if you weren't coming from any of those places, but literally a place of neutrality? Show me what's the truth. Not how I want it to be, or my own shortcomings, if you will, my own inadequacies or feelings of inadequacy, or my own feelings of self-puffedness. You really literally ask for and be prepared to see what the truth is without judging yourself, without judging someone else. It's more difficult than what people might think it is.
Yes, because sometimes if you ask somebody else what's the truth, they'll either be very nice to you, or they're the brutally honest type, who are brutal in their honesty.
Almost cruel in their honesty. Yes,
exactly. So there is a middle way between the two, of kind of complete ignorance and full consciousness, and it is to be conscious without being intellectual,
right?
Because intellectuality is often very divisive, and it all goes back. Everything goes back to mind without heart.
That's right.
What we've been talking about, the construct, is mind without heart, isn't it?
Yes. But
that's why we need to release it from. Go ahead.
We do, and I want people to really understand is that the construct, honestly, was never, in its concept, was never meant to be used against anyone or anything. In its original intent. But it is become what it is, and now it has to be completely dismantled. We have to brush off every single one of those strands, every single one of them, to see what's really there. Because if we saw what was really there, what we would see is the natural energy signatures that reside on this planet, and then we can draw from that and not the artificial construct, because that's what people are drawing on, because it's on the surface.
So how connected with the construct are, for instance, the Rothschild dynasties and things like that? What's the connection there? Because we know that there is a control mechanism. how does it work out through people and humans and beings
Well,
and
I mean,
all that stuff?
that's what happens, is that this construct is in the early days, when someone wanted to join in and be in physical form on this planet or any other planet that the construct infiltrates, right? But we're going to keep it to this planet. They knew what the truth was of it, and they loved it because they probably were part of the original creators or thought processes, right? And then eventually that got obscured as well, because the truth has to be obscured even from those that are controlling. They don't even know why they're being controlled. They don't even know that they've actually agreed to some of this on some level. Because as the years went by, and the thousands of years went by, and the millennia went by, that truth has become extremely distorted. And all they can feel from it is the power, the greed, and what they consider the glory. But they have no idea that they're just as big of a, and I'll use this term in this case, a victim of the construct as anyone else is, just being used because they serve a purpose.
So the construct doesn't show love. What does it show? How does it, what, if the people don't get love out of it, what do they get out of it? What is the
Out of the construct, out of
what's the
the
trade-off?
AI itself,
Yeah.
it has no emotional intent. You're absolutely correct with that. But on the negative side, we've already seen what has happened. We live it every day. We open up our doors, we turn on our TV. That's part of the construct. It's all part of the construct. But on the other side of that, it also allows us to be cognizant of energies, of signatures, of vibrations. So it gives us that idea that we can travel anywhere and do anything, that we're only limited by our thoughts, because our thoughts create. Okay? So the positivity is if we brush the sand off, or the top layer of dirt, then we can get into the idea that in a technological sense, we can create things from a different point of view, from our emotional state of view, our emotional state of being, and from a vibration of love and higher awareness and consciousness and different intentions. And then we begin to add to that same energy grid system, which is naturally occurring on our earth. And that's how we break down the construct, because it will no longer have a hold upon us. Instead, we're working with it and not against it. It's like
So
anything else, it can be manipulated.
we're about the top of the
We
hour,
are. We are, aren't we?
and it's been absolutely
Fascinating.
really.
I loved that. Was great.
So, do you want to do? Do you want to do the? I'm going to put my my picture up. I don't know if I
Okay.
can. Yeah, I'll figure out how to do it. Do you want to do the outro? With your music, and I'll do the kind of music.
Oh, you want me to sing?
No. Just do your regular outro.
Oh.
Where we'll generally leave you.
Okay, yes. All right. Very good. Well, honestly, first of all, before I do that, let me just tell everyone, thank you so much for being here. And if you're listening to this later on, we'll be doing this as a weekly thing, and I'll be getting into more information on the construct as the weeks go on. And I've so enjoyed it. So until we meet again, where will your life's journey lead you? Many blessings and good night.